Ed Davey, an election could be just around the corner. Let's talk about it being in spring. Are you ready?
Absolutely. And we're in good heart in our Bournemouth conference. I think it's partly because of all these by-elections we've been winning in the last few years and the council election results. It's so great to see so many new MPs and new councillors. And we're focused on the things that we care about, that the voters care about. So big one is the NHS. That's been a real problem for the government. They're failing miserably, and we've got some, I think, exciting policies which we're debating at Bournemouth. We're talking about the economy, of course, the cost of living, as well as environmental issues. So we've got a really busy conference, and I hope that'll propel us with our message into the election.
Of course, and in your document for a fair deal, you lay out some of this. Let's just talk about the politics of this. What's at the top of your agenda? Is it just to get the Tories out?
Well, clearly we are well placed to get a lot of Conservative MPs out of Parliament and to get the Conservative government out. But we have a Liberal Democrat agenda, which our Fair Deal pre-manifesto talks about. We believe that our economy is in a real mess. People are really struggling at the moment with high mortgages, high rents, high food, high energy bills. And I think any opposition party who is talking to voters knows that they've got to address those bread and butter issues, and alongside the cost of living, the things we're talking about, the things that voters are talking to us about, are the NHS and the care system, and that's why I've been speaking about that quite a lot now. You
will have read this morning that there is talk about the Prime Minister wanting to slash inheritance tax. Would you support him in that?
No. It's really clear when a Conservative leader is in trouble, they reach for the inheritance tax gig. They've done it before, but they've never delivered on it. And I think people reading that should look at the Conservatives' record on tax. They have raised taxes for people on lower incomes. And the idea they should now be talking about inheritance tax is quite preposterous. It would be a tax cut for the wealthiest. And what Liberal Democrats have done when we had the chance, we took the lowest paid out of income tax by raising the income tax allowance. Look what the Conservatives have done. We took over 3 million people out of income tax completely. Okay. The Conservatives have frozen that, and they've dragged the lowest paid back into income tax. That is a dramatic difference in terms of our priorities and the Conservatives. And that's why we talk about fair deal with real substance on those sorts of issues.
I want to come to the fair deal thing, but let's clear the air on one thing before we go on. You've already implied that you've got your policies, but part of it is that you want to be very different to Conservatives. If you look back now, you're a minister throughout the Conservative-Liberal coalition, you were Energy Secretary. If you had your time again, knowing what you do now, would you have agreed to putting the Conservatives in office in 2010, as you did?
Well, listen, Trevor, I've fought the Conservatives all my life. When I won my seat in Kingston and Surbiton, it was against the Conservatives, and I'm always fighting them in my seat.
Yeah, you didn't fight them for the 5 years that you were minister in their government.
No, but that's my point. I did. I fought them every single day in order to win Liberal Democrat priorities. And we did win. I mean, particularly in my area, we focused on renewables and offshore wind. And we made Britain the world leader in offshore wind.
Okay.
And that was in the face of Tory opposition. If you remember, take yourself back to those days, George Osborne and people like him were trying to stop me as a Liberal Democrat minister taking forward that agenda, and we won. I fought them and we won. And, that's what we're doing. We're doing, in whatever situation, we will strive to stop them doing what they want to do and make sure the Liberal Democrat agenda, whether it's on fairness, whether it's on the attacking climate change, those sorts of policies come through.
I get the point then. There's no objection in your part, in principle, to being part of some kind of coalition because you can fight from the inside. Let's go back to talk about what you want, which is in your, as you called it, the pre-manifesto document. I looked through the 50 pages of policy, and you said it's a blueprint. You've talked about the NHS already this morning. One of the things that you do highlight in the document is the triple lock on pensions. Yeah. And I just want to be clear, because you'd be the only party to be clear about this. Would you want to keep it if you were a Lib Dem government or part of any other kind of government?
Yes.
Under any circumstances, you will keep the triple lock.
Please, can I explain why? Because it's not just some random thing. The Liberal Democrats first came up with the triple lock. It was a guy called Steve Webb, who became Britain's best pension minister, and we introduced it Tories weren't keen on it. We introduced it, and we think it's been very successful. And let me explain why, the background. Because it's really important. It's a long history. Pensions over a
we don't
decade.
need to have the whole long history today.
But the Conservatives broke the link between pensions and earnings back in 1980. And for 30 years, British pensioners fell behind the rest of Europe, and we became bottom of the league for the state pension. Countries that are much less wealthy than us are paying their pensioners more. So the triple lock from the Liberal Democrats was designed to try to begin to rectify that. We've had 13 years of the triple lock.
I think people do understand why it's there. I just want to be clear that you are going to stick with it.
I hope you can see the passion
the IFS says it's going to
it.
cost 45 billion, and I just want to get clear, you want to stick with it. Let's talk about a second thing that's in your 50-page document. You're promising 150,000 new council or social housing homes each year. Would any of those be built on the Green Belt?
Almost certainly not. If you take our experience in my constituency, we're already building new council houses.
You're in Kingston, in southwest London.
And we're building it on brownfield land. And I have to declare an interest. My wife is a councillor in my constituency, and she's leading on housing. And I'm really proud of what she's been doing. She's now got a programme of building new council homes on brownfield sites, which is the largest programme for over 40 years. We're hoping to build 1,000. And, you know, I'm so proud of her and what the Liberal Democrats are doing. We're showing that our policies can be enacted.
So if I live in the Green Belt and there's a Lib Dem government, I can be absolutely certain you're not going to be sticking a housing development next to me. Keir Starmer says that Labour would consider building on the Green Belt, and he says that he's backing the builders, not the blockers. You OK with being a blocker?
I want to be a builder, but in places where people want houses built. The key thing is to make sure we get the right houses, which means that some have got to be more affordable than the ones that the developer-led approach from the Conservatives produced. But we want to make sure that it's sustainable too. And there is, you know London very well, Trevor.
I do.
Across London, there's so many brownfield sites that have not been built on, where it's perfect for building houses. All
right, I'm hastening you along because you've got limited time. I've actually read through your document, and there are a lot of promises like this. In fact, I counted 24 spending promises, which run...
That's quite standard,
each of which are in the hundreds of millions, including 1,000 more doctors, and there's some which are a billion extra pounds for farmers, £10,000 for every adult to spend on education and training during their lifetimes, add up to 10 billion a year, thereabouts. The question that most people will ask, and you're not saying we might, the document says we will, I counted 36 times. Most people are going to ask, how are we going to pay for all of this? And what I think is really interesting is that uniquely in politics, you tell us, you say that you are going to raise it through taxes. What taxes?
Well, let me take you through the spending program.
No, don't take me through it. Tell me how you're going to pay for it. Which taxes are going to pay for these tens of billions of promises? I'm very happy to do that, but it's not all being paid through taxes. That's going to be my point. First of all, a lot of our spending actually saves money. Take our proposal for free personal care. It's got a price tag of 5 billion. You probably read that in that document. But it also saves a huge amount of money on the NHS because people can leave hospital more quickly, so they're not taking up expensive bed space. You hope you'll save that amount of money. You don't know that, do you? Well, a lot of I listen to people who've studied this in great detail, and I take what they say very seriously, and that they believe that we can save up to £3 billion from the NHS and the budget on care homes. So I think that's very sensible. You can get better services, you can help the NHS, and you can save money. That makes sense, surely. And, you know, I'm really pleased you've read our document because when we publish the manifesto, there'll be a fully costed manifesto. Oh, really? Yeah. It'll all be full. Actually, the reason this is important, let me remind you of what you say. We will make sure that day-to-day spending does not exceed the amount of money raised in taxes over the medium term, with additional flexibility during periods of economic crisis. Right. I read that as saying that you're going to pay for it through taxes. So let me come back to you. Will you be raising taxes, particularly income tax, to pay for all of that. Your predecessors, Paddy Ashdown said a penny on the pound for education. Nick Clegg wanted a mansion tax. They were very honest. They said, we're going to have to pay for these things. Are you going to want new taxes to pay for all of the things that you've just talked about?
Well, I'm very happy to come to taxes, not least because I've been talking about that during the Parliament. I think at the moment, in a cost of living crisis, it'd be wrong to ask families for more tax. But what you can do, and I've been saying this for a few years now, is there are businesses out there who are making a huge amount of money and who could pay. And let me give you some really concrete examples. So I was the first, and Liberal Democrats were the first party to call for a windfall tax on the huge profits of the oil and gas companies in order to pay for some of our help for people struggling with their bills.
The problem is, Ed Davey, windfall tax happens once. I mean, nobody is going to argue that the promises you make are nice things. The question that they want answered is that if you are serious about being in government, you have to say something about how you want to pay for it. Your predecessors did, and thus far this morning, what you're telling me is that it's all going to pay for itself magically.
No, because I was going to come to something else, but you interrupted me, but that's fine. That's fine, Trevor. Another tax, which isn't a windfall tax, although a windfall tax could raise a huge amount of money, is our proposal to reverse the tax cuts that the Conservatives have given to the banks. That's about £4 billion a year. So that would be a significant change. I think the banks are making lots of profits. I don't see why the Conservatives think they're worth huge tax cuts.
All right. The one thing you haven't said, just very briefly, is that there'll be... you said there's going to be no deals, no pacts. Don't need to go over that. But in truth, the way that you will exercise influence is in some way by supporting potentially a Labour government. Not going to talk about that at all.
The way we're going to exercise influence is if we get lots of Liberal Democrat MPs elected at the next election.
OK.
And what I'm not going to do is what I
Your
could
share of the
criticise...
polls has not risen at all in the last couple of years. You're still around 11, 12%. In reality, you're going to have to share power at some point. Are you ever going to talk about that before the electorate has to make a choice?
Well, you mentioned the last few years. Let me tell you, in the last few years, we have won 4 historic by-election victories. We've made huge gains in councils and councillors across the country. But I'm really proud of what we are doing. That's why we're so confident in Bournemouth. And when I look to the next election, I think we will win lots of Liberal Democrat MPs, defeating huge number of Conservatives across the blue wall that I've talked about a lot, and back in the West Country, where I'm so proud we're now winning in the South.
I know, Lib Dems are back in the West Country. Ed Davey, thank you very much indeed. We'll talk again.